Welcome back to another episode of Peace Lutheran Evangelical Church's Sermon Podcast. Today, we are reflecting on Gospel reading Luke chapter 21, verses 5 through 19. Despite this passage being a type of what's called apocalyptic literature, Pastor Travis has timely and encouraging messages to share with us about today's Gospel reading. Tune in for your weekly dose of biblical inspiration. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for following the show on Spotify. It really helps.
Pretty striking, huh? Right? The disciples thought so too. They're standing in the temple, admiring all these massive stones, the beautiful gifts adorning God's house. And then Jesus says, it's all coming down. Not one stone will be left upon another. Now, if you're sitting there thinking this morning, well, that's sure cheerful for a Sunday morning, you're not alone. For the next couple of weeks as we head towards Advent, the lectionary gives us what scholars call apocalyptic literature. And I got to be honest with you, this stuff doesn't sound natural to our ears. We hear apocalyptic and we think disaster movies, end of the world, doom and gloom, everything going up in flames. And sure, there's destruction in these readings, but here's the thing. Apocalyptic literature isn't actually about the end. It's about meaning-making in the middle of chaos. It's a way of saying, yes, things are falling apart. Yes, it's scary, but God is still present, still faithful, and there's hope on the other side. The church puts these readings at the end of the liturgical year on purpose. We're about to enter into Advent, the season of waiting, of longing for Christ to come. But before we get to the manger and the angels and O come, Emmanuel, the church asked us to sit with this question. Why do we need Jesus in the first place? What are we waiting for him to save us from? That's what these readings are doing. They're naming the reality that the world is broken, that things do fall apart, that we can't save ourselves. So if the next couple weeks feel a little heavy, a little intense, that's normal. That's the church year doing its work. So let's not be afraid of this reading from Luke. Let's lean into what Jesus is actually saying. Because when Miley Cyrus sang about coming in like a wrecking ball, she was singing about a relationship falling apart. But Jesus is talking about something that the disciples thought was indestructible. He's talking about the very house of God, the center of their faith, their identity, and their connection to centuries of tradition. King Herod built the temple to show power and permanence. It's adorned with ornate, beautiful gifts to display wealth and stability, because appearances matter. And Jesus says it's all coming down. And we've watched stones come down on our own lives, right? We've seen family farms sold. We've seen N&R, Golden Brown Bakery, and Sherman's Dairy and Ice Cream close. We've buried people we thought would be around forever. Some of us have walked away from relationships or have had family members walk away from us. We know what it feels like when things we think were solid turn out to be fragile. So let's look at what Jesus really says about all this, because it's not what we might expect. When someone was speaking about the temple and how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, Jesus said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another, all will be thrown down." But before all this occurs, they will arrest you and persecute you. They'll hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. So make up your minds not to prepare your defense in advance, for I will give you words of wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. By the time Luke was writing this down, the temple had already been destroyed. It happened in the year 70 of the Common Era. So this isn't a prediction anymore. This is Luke helping his own community make meaning of what they're living through. They're asking, where was God when all the stones came down? Where is God now that everything we thought was firm has crumbled? If the temple is supposed to be where God is, where is God now? And notice what Jesus says. He doesn't really answer their question directly. He says, you're going to hear about wars and insurrections. Don't be terrified. There will be earthquakes, famines, plagues. You'll be arrested, persecuted, betrayed, even by your own families. He's not sugarcoating it here. But then he says one thing that changes the entire situation. This will give you an opportunity to testify. And here's the line that keeps sticking with me this week. Don't prepare your defense ahead of time, because I will give you words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. And then, by your endurance, you will gain your souls. Let's sit with that for a second. By your endurance, you will gain your souls. Not by your endurance you will survive without a scratch. Not by your endurance you'll avoid pain, but you will gain your souls. I read this week about a 4th grade class that earned a reward for good attendance. They got to vote either a homework pass or permission to bring a stuffed animal to school. What do you think they chose? I hear nothing. Shout it out. Come on. Animal. Animal? Anybody else? The homework pass? They chose the stuffed animal. Because as one kid explained it, there's really no such thing as a homework pass. You might skip it for that day, but you're eventually still going to have to learn it. Even 10-year-olds understand you can't skip the hard lessons, but you can choose what keeps you company through them. And that's what Jesus is offering here, not a homework pass, not an escape hatch, but his presence. He says, don't prepare ahead of time, because the pressure to prepare comes from fear that we won't be enough, that we'll fail in the moment. Jesus is saying, you won't be enough. You were never supposed to be, but I will be. I will give you the words. I will give you the wisdom. I will be with you. Endurance isn't about pushing through on our own strength. It's about trusting that God shows up in the mess, not after it's over. It's about holding on to God when everything else is letting go. And somehow when we do that, we become most fully ourselves, most fully claimed by Jesus. We gain our souls. So what does that look like? What does endurance look like when the stones are coming down around us? And what are you enduring right now? Maybe it's a health crisis that won't resolve quickly. Maybe it's financial worry or grief that won't lift, or watching someone you love make choices that scare you. Maybe it's just the slow accumulation of living in a world where the news is relentless and the stones keep coming down. In just a little bit, we're going to have our annual congregational meeting this morning. We'll look back on this past year, the joys and the struggles, the things that went well and the things that were harder than we had hoped. We'll look at numbers and budgets and plans, and all that is good and necessary. But I want you to hear this first. Our endurance as a congregation isn't measured by whether everything went smoothly this year. It's not about whether we hit every goal or avoided every difficulty. Our endurance, our faithfulness, is about the fact that we are still here, still showing up, still holding on to God and to each other when the stones come down, still bearing witness to God's presence in the mess. That's what we're celebrating today. Not that we get a homework pass, not that we chose to keep each other company through the hard lessons. And we're ready by God's grace to do it again. Whatever you're enduring, Jesus says, don't prepare your defense. Don't try to have all the answers. Don't pretend you have the strength to carry it alone, because you don't. And that's okay. I'll give you words when you need them. I'll be with you in the mess. By endurance, by holding on to me when everything else is letting go, you will gain your soul. See, friends, our legacy isn't wrapped up in the stones that we build, Those will come down eventually. Every building, every institution, every structure we think is permanent. Our legacy is wrapped up in God claiming us, holding us, speaking through us when we face trials. That's the promise that Jesus makes today. Not a homework pass, not an escape from hardship, not even that the temporary or anything else that we build will stand forever. But this, God with us, God in us, God speaking through us when we have no words of our own. And that presence, that promise, that unshakable claiming of you as God's beloved, that, friends, is the only thing the wrecking ball can't touch. Amen.
That's this week's episode of Peace Lutheran Sermons podcast. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.